Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give it a few more seconds here to let everyone join in. We know we had a lot of interest and response from part one of this, so we thank you for taking some time to join part two. We'll make sure we give a little time for everyone to make it in. All right, let's get this started. So again, as I mentioned, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us here on this Wednesday. Hope your week is going well. We're glad you joined us for this part two on this very important topic of parts markup. We had a great discussion last time with our guest speaker, Cecil, and we decided to extend this into a part two so we could dive a little bit deeper into better understanding common pitfalls and how we can work around them in a parts markup strategy in your shop. So I would encourage you, as with last time, if you joined us, please use the chat function to post questions. Last time we had a lot of great questions, and unfortunately we weren't able to get to them all, but I will do my best to look through the chat and try to summarize some common themes around questions and make sure that I'm surfacing those to Cecil. And at the end, we will take about 10 or 15 minutes as well to get through more of the questions that you pose in the chat box as well. We understand your time is valuable. So first, again, thank you for joining us. If you do need to hop at the end of the presentation, so to speak, and can't stay for the Q&A, please know that we will be sending this out to not only those who have attended, but to everyone who's registered, so you can view and listen into that Q&A section of this. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. Just as a way of reminder, PartsTech, we are a platform that makes it fast and easy for your shop to find and order the parts that you need across both parts and tires. We put all of your suppliers into one lookup, cutting out the hassle of you having to make separate phone calls, cutting out the hassle of you having to log in separately into your suppliers, each and every single one of them. We make that now a very easy and simple experience to be able to find what you need in one lookup. We are absolutely free. There is no need to enter in any credit card information during the sign up process. We just need your shop information. We'll get you a username and password, and then we'll help you get your suppliers set up and integrated into a management system if that's how you are using us, and you're on your way. Simple as that. We allow you to connect unlimited number of part and tire suppliers into PartsTech, making sure that you've got the full breadth of availability when it comes to looking for parts from suppliers that you prefer to do business with. All right, so as a recap of what brings us together today, PartsTech recently conducted a survey, a very broad survey across hundreds and hundreds of repair shops. One of the key findings that stood out to us was this idea of parts markup. We found that a considerable amount of shops are leaving money on the table when it comes to how they're marking up parts, gross profit margin analysis, and things of that nature. So that put a bug in our minds to say, this is something we should dive into a little bit more, bring in some experts within the industry so we could facilitate a conversation and helping shops in the industry here better understand parts markup and be on the way to better profitability. Now, for those who joined us in the first webinar, we did mention that there was some information that was available to you. Here we've just got a QR code. If you wanted to scan this, you would be brought to a landing page where we put together some material in collaboration with the Institute to be able to walk through a couple of these hot topics on terms, formulas, what are some of the foundational steps in determining this, a sample parts markup matrix, as well as the recording from our first part of this. And again, this was all done in collaboration with Cecil and the team there at the Institute. But today we get the honor of having Cecil join us. And Cecil, you made this statement here that many shops are leaving thousands and thousands of dollars per year on the table due to insufficient part markup practices. And so we are excited again to welcome you back to this part two of our webinar and to dive into more questions, more topics around how we can help shops understand this whole idea of parts markup and very practical ways to get that in there. So without further ado, Cecil, I'll turn it over to you and let you take it from here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John. As we go, we do want questions. We like questions. It's not letting me share my screen, John. Now it is. How about that? We like questions. We want your questions. So please use the chat function or the Q&A to ask questions. I'm Cecil Bullard. I'm a coach and a consultant. I've been in the industry my entire adult life, and I've been coaching for about a little over 20 years now, worked with thousands of shops. And so I see this over and over and over. When we first come into a shop, we look at parts margin, and parts margins are usually somewhere in the 32% to about 44% range, when they should be in the 55 to 58% range. And that's where we get the average shop is probably losing somewhere around $40,000 to $70,000 a year on their parts margin, just not marking parts up correctly. Now, in webinar number one, which, by the way, the QR code that we had on the screen earlier will get you that webinar. We went through a few different things. One of those is the idea that parts margin is really easy to fix in the shop. You put a parts matrix in place and you stop getting emotional about pricing. This is what it costs. Think about going into a local restaurant and haggling over the price of the steak, or wanting to bring your own steak into that restaurant. It just doesn't happen. The automotive industry is one of the few places where people can, in a way, haggle over whether they bring their own parts in, which is against the rules completely. We're not going to cover that here, but there's a whole series on that. And then also about what we're going to pay or what we're going to mark the parts up. And most customers don't understand what you're doing. They just know what the final price is. The other thing that we did talk about in number one that you're going to want to make sure you know is how to financially balance the business so that I'm making the gross profit and the dollars that I need. Now, this is a QR code that will get you the workbook that goes for 1 and 2. And so I'm going to leave this on the screen for just a minute. And then we're also going to have this on the screen at the very end. So if you don't get you should get the workbook, because it'll help you with the formulas and other things that we have been talking about. So please, again, ask questions. You're going to want to get the workbook. So I'm going to take this off the screen here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. This is a parts matrix. So all the lead up before, you need to put a parts matrix into your shop. This is a particular matrix that's been developed and modified over the years to get a shop about 58% margin when you mark things up. And so when you're dealing with a parts matrix, what you're doing is you're basically saying, if I buy a part from, say, $0 to $2.50, I'm going to mark it up times 4. So it's a 400% markup, and that's the multiplier, and that's a 75% profit. And because of what your average part is, we want the average part to fall right in the about 60% range. And so, 24 years ago, when I was first started doing all of this, I was looking at the average part price that we sold in the industry, and it was, at the time, it was about $26 and change, so just between 26 and 27. And so this matrix has changed over the years, and the markup has changed a little bit over the years in order to maintain the right parts margin in my shop. So if I buy a part that is say today, if my average price on a part is $55, then if I buy that part at say 55, I'm going to mark it up times 2.5, which is a 250% markup and a 60% margin. Don't confuse markup and margin. Markup is the multiplier that you use to get to the price. Margin is the difference between what I paid for the part and what I received for the part. So, if there are any questions about matrix, now's a great time to ask those questions.
And I might
The
just mention here, Cecil, sorry, there's just some comments here in the Q&A. Please put your questions into the Q&A section and not the chat. I may have misspoken to lead us up, so please put your questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, and you'll notice here that there's a parts matrix for a dealer and there's a parts matrix for a jobber. And one of the questions that we get a lot is, do I have to follow the manufacturer's suggested list that the dealer charges? And I don't remember if we answered this question in part one, but I'm going to answer it again. And that answer is absolutely not. If you follow the manufacturer's suggested list, most of your dealers are going to give you 20% off of that. And so I'm going to, buy that part for 80 and sell it for 100. And I'm going to have no real margin in that. It's going to be very, very small. And at the end of the day, I won't have any profit in my parts. And parts profit is about 45 to 50% of my profits. That's helps me pay my bills and my utilities and my rent and myself and have a net profit in the shop. And so you'll notice on the dealer matrix that the dealer matrix is it starts, whoa, love this mouse. It starts at a little higher, but it fizzles out a little faster. So in my shop, the shops that I have run, last shop that I ran, the lowest matrix part we had was a 45.9%. So a 1.85 multiplier. And I would tell you also that there are certain parts that I might not put in a matrix that I might buy, things like tires. Tires don't have the same margin as other parts. And also, a lot of shops don't put batteries in a matrix. They have a different matrix for a battery. So they're charging a lower markup and a lower margin on things like batteries in order to be competitive. Now, I will also tell you that out of all the shops that we work with, there are a certain percentage of shops, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 or 12%, that basically mark up dealer parts exactly the same and even batteries the same as they would mark up a parts on the jobber matrix. Jobber would be a Worldpac, a CarQuest, a Napa, and of course dealership. We should know exactly what that is. Now, John, I hope you're monitoring questions, and if we
I
get
am.
some, that you
There are.
ask the question. So go ahead.
There are. And right on topic with the various parts here, we had someone raise the question around oil changes. So oil, air filters, cabin filters. Do you have any guidance on that type of job and where that fits sort of in the parts matrix?
I will tell you that when I was running a shop, the last shop I actually personally ran was 2009, 2010. That's when I started 100% coaching, and I kind of got out of the running a shop business. I marked up my oil filters, my oil, and my air filters exactly the same as any other part. I did not do anything special, but we did not sell an oil change. So this is a kind of a different thought process, I think. I always had a minor service in my shop, and I did not have an oil change because I didn't want to compete with the oil changers, right? And so if I look at the quote unquote oil change companies, I think my part is a superior part. I buy a more expensive filter that has, it's better on the inside. Just get a cheap oil change and cut that filter apart and then grab one of those good filters that you would put on the customer's car, and you notice that, the filter from the cheap oil change place is not the same. The other thing is my technicians, I think, were better than the technicians at the cheap oil change place. And so I did not want to compete with an oil change. I had a minor service. And at the time, I know everybody's going to say this is nuts, but at the time, my minor service was $165 when oil changes were going for $29, $39, and $49. And I know we're not there now. The local cheap oil change place here is $89 for a oil change today. Um, and so I don't necessarily want to be competitive with those people. And if I don't want to compete with those people, I don't sell an oil change. I sell servicing the car. So I don't, maybe that doesn't answer the question. I have shops that feel like they need to be price competitive on certain items. And we're going to talk about that a little more as we go. And so they have a less expensive oil change and they mark their parts up less, which is fine. And as long as you make up for it somewhere else. So at the end, I want to have 58% parts margin is my goal. If I have 50, I always tell my clients if I have 55%, I'm not going to fight with them or, I'm not going to get too busy. If we get down to 52, I'm going to start talking about it. And if we drop below 52, then I'm going to have a serious conversation. When you think about like a typical shop might do $800,000 and about half of that is parts, about 400,000. If I'm off by 10%, if I'm at 48 instead of 58, that costs me $40,000. And that's the 40,000 that we're talking about. So if you work for a big company, Walmart, big corporate Walmart store, Walmart's going to sell certain items cheaper than you can buy them somewhere else. So they've got discounted items. And if you read the book that was written about Walmart, Sam Walton, it's probably 25 or 30 years old now. But at the time and today, they knew exactly what you're going to come in and buy if you are a customer that walks in their door. Why do they change oil so cheaply, or why do they have cheap, batteries, cheap tires? Because they know when you walk in the store, you're going to buy a certain number of items. That happens to be three on average. That was before they put grocery stores in most of the Walmart, so that number's probably changed. But they also know that you're going to buy one cheap item and two marked up items. And so I don't care if you decide, look, I want to be competitive on oil changes. So my oil change is going to be inexpensive and I'm not going to have a great margin on that. But what gets forgotten in the automotive industry is the other side of that. And so if I'm a corporation, I know that if I don't get my margin, that my stockholders will be upset and my stock price will go down and I'll be out of business. That's how that works. In an automotive shop, little mom and pop shop, which is most of us are independents, etc., we often go, okay, I'm going to bring that down because I want to be competitive. But we don't think I need to bring everything else up by 1 or 2 points to make up for that.
Mm.
So as long as your pricing is part of a methodology or a thought out methodology so that you get the margins you need, I'm absolutely fine with that. And so I'll tell certain clients, I mean, I have some client, by the way, probably again 10 to 15% of my clients, they mark up their parts, they don't care, they get what they need, they carry a 58 to about a 62% parts margin, and they don't get their customers don't leave them and they don't hate them and they don't say, oh, they're too expensive. They just they believe the service is great, they believe they've got a good product, and they're willing to pay for it. So
Mhm.
10 to 15% of my clients do nothing. About I don't know, 20 to 30% of the clients that we get in, usually when they first start, they're very nervous about marking parts up. So they go in tiers. They go, okay, I'm going to do it on oil pumps and I'm going to do it on oil pan gaskets and water pumps, but on brakes and oil changes, I'm not going to mark up the parts the way I would. And
Mm.
I'm like, okay, fine. That's fine. Just if you're going to pick out 10 things that you want to be price competitive on in your marketplace, then be price competitive. Keep your prices inexpensive, whatever. I hate to use the word cheap because that's a different connotation. Um, keep your prices down on those 10 items, but you have to raise the other, 985 items that you sell by 1 or 2% to make up for the difference. And that's what you do, and that's how you manage it. So
Okay.
are there any other questions here before I
Yeah.
move on?
Yeah, let's just one quick one, and then I know we've still got a decent amount of material to cover here. Along just one last question on the parts thing here. The several questions revolved around sort of the 750 mark and up. We sell and install transmissions, engines, clutches, turbos, some of the higher dollar parts in there. What's some of the advice around that type of
I,
a strategy?
So I've worked with so many different businesses over the years, and it brings to mind a Subaru shop that was doing a ton of Subaru motors, probably doing 4 or 5 Subaru engines a week in this particular shop in a big area, and our parts margin was terrible, right? And so I come in and I'm like, okay, we're really losing a lot of money. I mean, they were probably 28% because mostly what they're selling are these giant items, these big items. And so I went to the owner and I said, okay, we need to increase our margins here on parts. And so we're selling all these engines, and those engines are very expensive. So, number one, what's the bottom line profit margin that you're willing to accept? Now, here it's 45, 46%. Now, but I used to be in some shops, we had a 35% was our bottom line margin when I was running a shop, 15 years ago. The lowest I would mark up a part would be 35%. So if I'm buying an engine, I'm marking up 35%. Now that's about a 1.62 multiplier, something like that. And so I might buy $1,000 motor and sell it for $1,600 and get myself a whatever it's 35% or whatever that is. You have to determine where you are. Now back to my engine shop. I went to the owner and I said, okay, can we change the price of engine? They were like, no way, our clients will leave us, and we won't be doing motors. And so I was like, okay, what can we raise the price by $500? So we're currently selling an engine for, I don't know, 3,500. Can we sell it for 4,000? I said, no, we can't do that. I said, okay, well, what about $400? I said, no, we can't do that. I said, what about 300? Nope. What about 200? No. What about $100? Can we just raise the price of an engine job by $100? And they said, okay. And so I said, okay, we're going to raise the price tomorrow by $200. And we raised the price $200 an engine. Now, nobody stopped. Nobody that was going to buy a $4,000 engine or a $3,500 motor said no because it was $200 more. And I think in my experience, and it is pretty vast. I've done this forever. The buyers are the buyers, and the not buyers are the not buyers. Now, depending on your marketing, maybe you brought a lot of not buyers in your shop. If you've been running a lot of discount coupon marketing, you're attracting a certain segment of the market that's looking for discounts and coupons. Duh. And if you're not, and you never have, then you're looking for, you're attracting a segment of the market that's looking for relationship and quality. And so, um, if I want, if I've got relationship and quality customers in my shop, and the job's going to be 3,700, if it's 39, the people that we're going to say yes at 37 will not say no at 39. It really doesn't matter because they're not price in every survey that's been done on what do customers want. Price is in the top 9 or 10, but it's always 9 or 10. It's never first, second, third, fourth. It's even fifth is the highest it ever comes up. It's always about convenience and quality of product and trust and relationship before it's about price. So, uh, long answer is maybe I have a lot of engines and I have to say to myself, well, maybe I'm never going to have a 58% margin, but I am going to bring my motors up or my transmissions up by X dollars. By the way, back in the day, the transmission shops were the shops that made the highest margin because the parts on transmission rebuilds, there was huge margin in the parts. I know because I ran a big transmission concern for years. Um, and we made better margins than any automotive service and repair shop. Things have changed over the years a bit, but those are good margins. And I think you have to decide. Cecil's telling you 58%. Some of you are going to say there's no way in heck, and some of you are going to decide, well, what if I do 52? Okay, then set it for 52, and then manage your matrix to get 52. That's your decision. What profits you make is your decision. I'm going to tell you what I think best practices are. I'm going to tell you what not only me as a coach and consultant teach in the industry, but probably out of the 40 other guys that do this that I know, probably 39 of them teach the same numbers. All right. So you can't just put a matrix in place. You'd think to yourself, oh, I'll just put a matrix in place and leave it, and that'll be fine. You actually have to monitor it, and you may have to adjust it. Reasons that you might adjust it is it might not fit your business. So you take my matrix that is more for a general repair shop or a specialty shop, like not specialty like transmission or heavy duty engine, but more for European cars when I talk specialty, and you put that in place and your prices are just too high for the customers that you're attracting. And you say to yourself, okay, I can't use that matrix. Well, what you do is you make minor adjustments to the matrix. And until you get to where you feel like, okay, this matrix is working for my shop and it's getting me the margins that I want. And the reason why the matrix might not work is because of the type of jobs you do. So if you're a tire store where you're doing tires, I don't have tires in this matrix. I have tires in a different matrix. We set a goal for 40% on tires. Most of the tire stores that I would be working with are probably in the 37, 38% on their tires. There's some other things that would qualify based on buying, and so some of the big guys that are buying millions of tires can get their tires at a better price and mark them up a little less. I can't compete with those people, and I'm not going to. My clients buy tires from me because it's convenient for them, and they don't want to have to go somewhere else and deal with that, and so they're willing to pay a little more for the tires from my business. Um, I might have that business, the tire store business, where half my business is tires, and I'm going to have a lower margin on those. But on the things that are not tires, that are service and repairs, I'm going to set a goal for 58%, and I'm going to track that and try to, make adjustments to my matrix to get there. I might have a shop where I'm doing a lot of engines. We are working currently with a lot of diesel shops, and for some reason, our diesel shops have much higher average repair orders, and they're doing motors and other things that some of our general repair shops are just not doing. And so we may make adjustments to the matrix for the type of jobs we do so that we maximize our margins and hit the targets that we want to hit.
Cecil, just
Yes.
a quick question there. It's come up a little bit in the chat here, the Q&A. When we're saying margins, I know we covered this just briefly in the last one, but can you just sort of reset the audience on some of the terminology? The
When you're
difference between
okay.
margin and markup and gross profit, things like that.
So margin is the difference between what I paid for the part and what I charge for it. And you will see margin a little later in the, we're going to go through it so you really understand it. And then one more slide or two slides down. Markup is the multiplier. So if I want to get a 50% margin, I have to use a 200% multiplier. So I have a dollar part, I sell it for $2. That's a 200% markup. 2 times 1 equals 2, and but it's a 50% margin. And I'll explain that exactly in a moment with a slide. Gross profit, you have gross profit. So in an automotive business, we sell parts and labor. That's on another slide coming up real soon. But I pay for the part and I pay for the labor, and then what's left in the pile is my gross profit. So gross profit is what's left after you take your variable expenses. And I know some shop owners and some people are saying, well, what's a variable expense? Variable expense is parts and labor, because if I don't do any jobs, I don't pay for any parts or any labor, but I still have rent, I still have utilities, I still have some staffing costs, management costs, etc. So those, in a way, don't, those are later. Those come after, below the line, after my gross profit. So I have here's my sales. I pay for my parts, I pay for my labor, I have money left in that pile. That is my gross profit. And then I take out all my fixed expenses and everything called net profit after I pay all the bills. But before I pay taxes, I have what's left in that pile, and we're going to target 20%. Now, we went over all of that in part one. So if you're fuzzy on that, you can view part one and you can see all of that with all the math. Number three, if you decide to discount some items, you got to raise others. And we've already kind of covered that, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But the more items you discount, the higher price the rest needs to be so that I make the margins that I want. It's kind of funny. We talked about three different ways of marking up parts. And number one of the ways is to double every part. So we have people that say, I'll just double the parts. That'll give me 50%. I'll make all the money I want. And then I get a $4 oil filter and I'm okay to sell that for $8, but I get a $4,000 motor. I'll never sell it for, an engine that I won't sell that for 8,000. I'll sell a $4,000 engine for maybe five or maybe 4,800, but I'll never sell it for 8,000. And so I end up with I don't know, on the engine, which is now this huge part of my parts. It's, $4,800 worth of my parts sales. I end up with a 22 or 23 or 24% margin. And then I bring this 50% from this oil filter that's $4, and I still am at 23, 0.1. How many oil filters do I have to sell at $8 to make up for one engine that I sell at 4,800 if I paid 4,000 for it? And so there's always this idea of paying attention to your numbers and trying to balance things out so that you're sure of, where you really are in the long run. If you're doing it the way that I would suggest, you're probably looking at your matrix and you're looking at your margins monthly, parts margins, and you have a system, a matrix in place, and you have some processes around how you mark up parts so that your people know how to do it. And then you look at your parts margin at the end of the month and you say to yourself, oh, we were great. We're great. I don't have to look anywhere. I don't have to go anywhere. Or you might look at your parts margin and you're trying for 58 and you're getting 38. And then you say, okay, well, what did we do? Is the matrix broken or are we not following the matrix? So it kind of gets us to our another slide. If our goal is 58, but our actual margins are 48, again, the difference between what I paid for the part and what what I got for it, then I might have one of three problems. It really comes down to three things. I got a broken matrix. So I might need to adjust it based on the fact that I'm buying more dealer parts than somebody else. I mean, certain shops believe that only dealer parts are the right parts and you need to put those on. I don't subscribe to that myself. I do, having been a tech and run shops and own shops, I do know that in some cases the dealer part is the better part and I need to use it. But it's not every part. Some shops actually believe that. They're going to buy a much higher percentage of dealer parts. And so they need to look at their matrix and make adjustments for that, or they won't make the money that they should. The second thing is that I'm doing more of those bigger jobs. That was the question. If I'm doing engines and transmissions, Cecil, and you're telling me to make 58%, ha ha ha, not going to happen. There's also a thing called gross profit per hour. And if I'm making enough gross profit on a job, I might look at, an engine. I'm going to do that engine in 20 hours. And I don't know, my profit on that job is, say, $3,000. So I'm making $150 an hour in gross profit. After I pay for the parts and the labor, I have $150 an hour. I made whatever that $3,000 profit on that job. And then I do a brake job, which is only a $600 job, but it costs me $300 in parts and labor. And so now I've got a $300 profit for an hour's worth of work or a $150 profit for an hour's worth of work. As long as I'm bringing the right gross profit, and this is not a class for that. We're just talking about parts margin here. But I do need to think about my gross profit. It's an important part of making sure that my shop is making money. And so I might run an engine shop where I'm doing a lot bigger jobs. I might have a lower parts margin overall, but when the dollars are done, I'm making the same amount of dollars at the end of the month, right? And so either I've got a plan to make dollars, gross profit dollars, and therefore net profit dollars cover my expenses and leave me money in the pile, or I have a plan to make sure I'm marking my parts up correctly and getting that margin, because when that's all done, then I still make 20% net. That's the plan, right?
And you alluded to this a little bit in your response a minute or so ago here. One individual asked the question, why should we run a lower margin on dealer parts? Where we source the part shouldn't affect my needed margin.
And you remember I told you that like 15% of my clients, that's their attitude and they just mark up parts. It's kind of funny. And there's a very big metro area. And if I mention the area, you probably would know the guys I'm talking about. But there's two pretty big players up there, maybe three. And they happen to be clients. One of them is a big European area. He's got multiple shops, and every time that I talk to him, I'm like, "Your parts margin sucks, right? It's at 48%." And he explains to me that where he's at in his community, you can't make 58%. You have to shoot for 52. And if you shoot for 52, you end up with 48. So he goes, "I'm happy with that, Cecil." And I'm like, "Okay, great. That's what you've chosen. I'm far be it for me to argue with you too much." I have another client up there that actually runs two shops. He does he'll make 2 million net out of these two shops. One of his shops will do, I don't know, 6 or 8 million dollars this year, and then the other shop does 3 million. And he'll make $2 million in profit. He does all the time. And his parts margins are like 60%. And by the way, these two businesses are within 15 miles of each other, and they're literally kind of competitors. Well, I've got one guy that tells me, "Well, you can't make money on parts in this area." I've got another guy that tells me, "I just mark them up and the customers pay for it or they don't." I've got a guy in the San Francisco area. He's a mobile mechanic, and he gets 64 to 67% margin on his parts. He figures, I'm mobile, I'm coming to them. They need to pay for it. And that's how I mark it up. And by the way, his clients pay it. Um, I always say when I'm teaching, I'm going to write this book, and the book's going to be titled "Cecil, You Don't Understand," because I have people telling me all the time, "Well, you don't understand where I'm at, or you don't understand the business I'm in, or you don't understand." And so if you're in San Francisco, you can't make parts margin because people are, this, or if you're in Utah, you can't make parts margin because people are this. And I got to tell you, that's all hokey. That's all hokey. It's whatever's in your head. Biggest problem you have is here in your brain. If you believe you can make parts margin, you mark them up. The majority of your clients are going to pay it. You're going to lose a couple, but the majority will pay it, and they'll be happy to pay it because they're not there because you're the cheapest guy in town. They're there because they believe that you're giving them a service that there's value in it. Okay. Um, Someone's not following your matrix. This is the problem we find most of the time. Someone, usually the owner, is feeling for the customer and saying, "Ah, man, this is awfully expensive. I'm going to lower this part by $100 because it's not real dollars. It's not like you're taking money out of your pocket, right? It's on paper right now. It doesn't mean anything. It's not real dollars." And what I tell owners and service advisors is go to the bank, get yourself some brand new $20 bills, and when you decide to lower the price on a part because you feel bad for the customer, just take some of those $20 bills out and hand them over the counter and have the customer pay you with those. Because every time you discount the part or anything else, frankly, you're actually giving away dollars that you should make. Um, and I think we are very emotional in this business. We really feel for our clients, which is wonderful. But I will tell you that I didn't build the car, I didn't buy it, I didn't drive it, I didn't break it. I shouldn't have to supplement the customer's repairs. When I go to the grocery store, they don't look at me and say, "Oh, that's Cecil. He's been living here for 25 years. He's had raised 4 kids and 14 of their friends over the years, and he's bought, millions of dollars worth of groceries. And so we're just going to lower his prices because he's a good guy, and we don't want him to feel bad when he checks out and pays for those milk and eggs." They don't do that. When I go to the nice restaurant over here, which I'm in quite a bit, get myself a steak. They don't say, "Oh, that's Cecil. We know him really well. Normally our steak would be, $55, but we're going to lower it down to 35 because Cecil's a nice guy and we feel for him." They don't do that. We only do that pretty much in the automotive industry. So if I'm managing the business, number one, I'm going to have a matrix in place. If I'm managing the business, I'm going to look at where my margins are, and I'm going to make adjustments to my matrix based on the type of parts I'm buying, type of jobs I'm doing, where I'm getting those parts so that I get the margin I need to. And if I'm managing the business and we have a matrix in place and that matrix is adjusted and we're not getting our margin, I'm going to start looking for heads to cut off. And no knives are used and no people are hurt. But I'm going to find out who's discounting, and I'm going to go find out if they want to actually pay for that themselves. Because when they're discounting, they're actually taking money out of my pocket, their pockets, and believe it or not, my customer's pocket. Because if I have no profit, I can't take care of a customer that has a problem. So anyway, that's it. Um, I am going to come out of this really quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. The matrix that you will get from PartsTech from the QR code is a lot like this. You can put the price in. Here we have a $34.95 part. That's what we paid for it. And based on the matrix, we're going to charge $96.11 for it. We could put in a $14,000 part. Let's see, 0.00. So it cost me 14,000. I'm going to sell for 2,800 in this matrix. $1,400. It ain't working right. That should be lower. I'll have to look and see why that isn't doing what it's supposed to. Let's see if we can put it down here and make it work. $1,400, $2,590 is what I'm going to sell that for. Ignore that particular one. The lower thing isn't working. I know it is on your calculator. I patched together for the last minute so I could show it. I'm going to buy I don't know, a $12 part in 30 cents from my local job. I'm going to sell that for $33.83. I'm going to buy a $22 part from my dealership, and I'm going to sell it for $49.50. Depends on which matrix, but the matrix that you guys have all works properly. I know that. We've looked through it. And if you have that little tool, you can just put the prices in and it'll tell you what. Also, almost every point of sale that I know of, I always say almost because I don't know of all the point of sales, but everyone that I know of has a matrix built in that I can manage. It might even have multiple matrices that I can put in for different vehicle types or different types of jobs or where I got parts. And it will do the calculations in and of itself. Any questions here, John?
I think we have some that we'll get to at the end here. I'd like for you
Okay.
to
I'm going to
keep motoring.
buzz
There's
right
good
through
stuff
this.
coming.
All right. So I have to understand how I make profit in an automotive business. I only have two things to sell. I buy parts from someone and I resell them. I mark them up. I buy labor from someone and I resell it to my customers. That's how I make money in the automotive business. So if I don't mark up my parts correctly, that's about half of my business, maybe 45%, then I might lose 10%. And if I lose 10%, I might lose $40,000 to $70,000. Labor's difficult to fix. That's a whole nother webinar. Parts is easy because it's just follow the matrix or don't follow the matrix. Adjust the matrix so that it gets you where you want to be. Labor's a lot harder because we're dealing with productivity and other issues and costs. That's another hour-long webinar.
Well,
How do
and maybe, yeah, and we won't dive into the details of that, but along the lines of labor, we had a really interesting question here asking, what do you think about charging the customer cost on parts? Like if they walked into an auto part and then just raised the labor, that way you don't have to pay more money on tax because the parts are high and taxable.
I think number one, the sales tax board, at least if you're in California, is going to come down on your fanny, and you're going to end up paying some extra taxes because they know what you should be marking parts up because they know what the average shop marks parts up. And so you do put yourself at risk of a sales tax audit and trouble. I'm not saying that's actually going to happen necessarily, but it could. Number two, I think it's kind of chicken. Mark up your parts like you mark up your labor. You should be making profit on parts as well as labor. I hate to see our industry go that way. There is a contingent that's basically saying, let's just sell parts for what we bought them for what the normal list is, and then let's mark up our labor. I guess in the long run, as a consultant, I don't care. As long as you make the right net profit and the right gross profit, it doesn't really matter. And I think that in some states where you have to define parts and labor, maybe you're more apt to do that. In other states, you don't have to. You just have to say this is what the job cost. It always makes me laugh. I was working with a client today, and I said you need to raise your labor rate by $20. He said, I can't do that, Cecil. And I said, well, what if we put a labor matrix in place and we just add 20% to the labor time? He was all over that. Oh yeah, I can do that. And the funny thing is that basically I'm doing exactly the same thing. It's it's funny to me where emotionally sometimes we're tied up and other places we're not. I don't know if I answered that question. Basically, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to recommend it to my clients or the industry because I just don't like it. I can't tell you anything other than that. As long as you make the profit that you need to, gross profit per hour and gross, margin, net margin, gross profit margin, net margin, you're fine. How do I calculate margins? Margin is calculated by taking the difference between what I paid for the price and what I sold it for, and then dividing it by what I sold it for. If I bought a part for $3.50 and I sold it for $11.50, I made an $8 profit. So my profit, 8 divided by 11.5 is 70%. That's a 70% margin on that part. Okay. So there's the math for you, the math behind the thing. Now, labor, I'm just going to do a labor one. If I bought the labor for $42.50, so that would be maybe paying a tech, $40 an hour, and then I got a $12.50 load, parts, FICA, FUTA, workers' comp, PTO, etc. And I sold it for 105. I made a profit of 61. Actually, geez, that's supposed to be 61.50. I've changed that in 5 different slides, which is about a 59% margin. So if I'm supposed to make 64% on my labor, I'm supposed to make 58% on my parts. I did really well on my part here, but I didn't do really well on my labor. I didn't get there. Okay. I'm going to die over this slide being wrong. Last slide of all. And we'll answer questions. I have a shop where I have a sales volume of $65,000 a month. I have a 60% gross profit. That gives me $39,000 in gross profit dollars to pay my bills. So I have a $500 average repair order. That means I need 130 cars. So assuming that I lower my margin because I'm not paying attention or I'm not using a matrix or I'm getting emotional by down to 50% on that same 65,000, now I've got 32,500. I'm $6,500 short to pay my bills and leave money. And if I have a $500 average repair order, it means that I need 156 cars to do the same business. And so I need 26 more cars. And the more cars you bring into your business, everybody thinks it's all about car count. It's not about car count. It's about margin. It's about making profit. If I lose $5 on every car that comes in, how many more cars do I want to work on today? I don't want to work on any if I'm losing money. And the whole point is here that there's a whole contingent out there saying, lower your price, get more business in. Well, you can do that. You can lower your margins and get more business in your shop. You can lower your margins by, I don't know, 15%. And you'll have almost $10,000 less, and you'll need 43 more cars to get the same money in your bank. And then here's the other part of that. It's literally talking about your fixed expenses. Let's look at the 32,000. Let's say I have a $32,000 worth of fixed expenses. That's me, the owner. I get paid for being a manager, etc. That's my rent, my utilities, my truck, my gas, my electric, my insurances, my banking costs. All of that stuff costs me 32,000 in a month. And I have a 60% net profit. Then I'm going to make a gross profit of 5,353. Cecil, get tangled up here. $53,333. That's my. I need to sell $53,300 to pay that 32,000. And if I have a $500 average repair order, it means I need 106.7 cars in my shop, and that would be to break even. That would be not making a net profit. It's just paying the bills. Now let's lower our margin. Let's lower it by 15 points. And so I'm losing 10 on my my parts. I'm losing 5 on my labor, which we see this all the time. I still have $32,000 in expenses. Now I have to do 71,000 in business. Now, by the way, because my margins are lower, it's actually going to lower my average repair order. So now I'm going to, instead of having a $500 average repair order, I'm going to have a $425 average repair order, 15% less. And it means I'm going to need 167 cars or an extra 60.7 cars in order to make the same, to break even, be zero. And so you got to be really careful about margin, because the more your margin slips, the more business I have to do to pay the bills, the more cars I have to bring in the business, and it's risky. Okay. All right, now we're ready for questions. And we'll leave this up while we ask questions, and then we'll go. I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cecil. Man, yeah, just some great questions. That's a great way to wrap it up. I love the diving in there and actually looking at what gross profit does to the business. Very valuable information there, Cecil. Thank you. A couple things around mobile mechanics. You alluded to it a little bit in your illustration about someone in California um, doing that as well. This one says, I'm a solo owner, operator of mobile mechanic. He called shops around in the area. They said they're all at 30%.
On their margins.
Yes, on their markup.
Where
Yeah.
are you? So in the southeast somewhere, in Mississippi, Missouri, Arkansas. Um, I'm sorry, I've been dealing with shops for 42 years, going on 43 now, and we have shops that are at 30 when they start. We don't have any shops at 30 when they end working with us. And by the way, if you are mobile and you're going to the customer's home and you're charging cheap to get that job, shouldn't you be charging more because you're actually creating convenience for them and going to their home instead of charging less? Um, uh, the we work with several mobile mechanics, as well as brick and mortar shops, several hundred of them actually, and most of our guys are probably, if we average margin between all of our people new coming on and our people who've been with us for a long time, we're probably averaging somewhere around 52% parts margin amongst all the shops that we work with. Think about a 22% difference in your parts margin. And if you're going to sell, I don't know, $100,000 worth of parts, that's $22,000. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's great. And along the lines of mobile here, this individual says, I do flat pricing for things like oil changes and brakes. Do you think this is a mistake?
Yes, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Flat pricing. So I'm going to do the same brake job on a Corvette as I'm going to do on a Camry, or a Honda, or I don't know, a Jaguar, a Jaguar. Um, I'm going to have the same price. There's no way in heck I'm doing that. Based on my cost is what you're going to pay. It's never going to be, I just set the price. I mean, it's just, are we are we going to the lowest common denominator? Are we building a business that's going to be successful financially in an industry that's going to be sought at and looked at like professionals and be profitable? Yes, that's a big mistake.
Yep.
Don't do it.
Right. Here's another one for you. If I sell a job that includes parts, such as a job for $300, part cost is 40. How do you back calculate for the part profit? Is
Parts, well,
30%?
I take that $40 part and I put it in the matrix, and it charges whatever it's going to charge. Um, which, by the way, if you're running your business correctly and you're estimating correctly, you have about 55% of your sales is going to be labor and about 45% is going to be parts. Parts margin should have a 58% margin. Maybe you don't stick to see, you're not as tough as I am, and you're going to be 52. Labor should be, if it's loaded, we want to see a 64% labor margin, or a little higher. Unloaded labor, we want to see 74 to 80 percent margin on, and the load is the FICA FUTA workers comp, whether you look at it either way. I would back into that and say that 55% of that 300, which is $165, is going to be labor. And so my part with is going to be the difference, which is $135. That $40 part's going to go out for $134.95. That's going to be a $300 job, all in. And by the way, I bet you that's about 60 to about 60% margin on that part.
All right, here's one. How would you matrix parts for commercial customers? Any different?
Depends on what part of my business is commercial and what my commercial customers are looking for. If my commercial customers are looking for price, um, we work with several different commercial fleet type customers. One guy does $200,000 aluminum tank repairs. Another guy is taking care of the air conditioning guy's fleet of cars and of trucks. And so when I'm selling the customer, I'm going to sell them on the idea that for every hour their truck is not on the road, it's costing them $400 to $1,000. Depends on what you're doing. If you're taking hazardous chemicals around the United States or Canada, then it's going to be a higher cost. If your air conditioning guy is not out fixing air conditioning units because the truck won't get him there, probably costing you around $450 an hour. And so I'm not selling a cheap price. I'm selling get it in, get it out fast, get it back on the road, make money. And so uh, the way I handle pricing for those guys is I talk about the value of what I do, like I would for any client, and I make some agreement with them. Maybe you've told them you'll only mark up parts 20% or 30%, and so now I have to start playing games with labor and try to make that extra money up in labor. Or maybe I reach out to my guy and say, look, we need to make 40 or 45, and they decide, hey, I don't want to work with them, or I will. Um, I I hate the fact that we would go, look, it's 30% to you because you're a fleet and you're going to bring me all this business. Um, so now the bulk of your business is people paying a lower margin. So how many more cars do I have to work on? And I don't know if that answers that question. It's not, my business is never going to be about price. It's always going to be about what we can do for you, how quick we can get that vehicle back on the road, and the quality of the product that we offer. And so I'm always going to charge a little more than probably somebody else will.
Yeah,
You get to
absolutely.
decide what you want to do.
Absolutely. All right, I think we got time for just one or maybe two more here, Cecil. And I know we've got a lot of great questions in there, and unfortunately, we won't be able to get to all of them. Um, I know you touched on it briefly. I just want to reiterate, there's several questions in here about tires. And I think you mentioned tires is somewhere in the 40% you would recommend.
We shoot for 40 in tire stores. It's funny. I've worked with all the different major tire chains or guys that had shops for different tire chains, and I went into one. We were about 24%. I told them we were going to get 40%. They thought I was nuts. 9 months later, we were at 38%. There are different things you can do to increase your tire margins. Not enough time to actually do that here, but I'm shooting for 40% on tires, especially in an independent shop that is not a tire store. My customers are going to pay a little more for the tires, but it's about the convenience, not the cheap tires. They can buy cheap tires anywhere. But their car is in my shop today. For the convenience, they're going to pay a little more
Mhm.
from us. And
Excellent.
shopping tires and how you sell tires, it's a different game than selling water pumps or brake jobs. It's a
Yep.
completely different sales process.
And one last question here, and maybe I'll ask you to stop sharing so I can throw it. One closing slide up here, Cecil. In closing, we talk a lot about emotion here,
Hmm.
and we've got another couple questions in here today around what do I do when people are out price shopping my parts on Amazon and they bring in, I found this part on Amazon for XYZ.
There
How
are
do we how do we handle this emotional tag that all of a sudden parts are a commodity and that people expect the lowest price anywhere on parts?
so think about going to your local restaurant and bringing your eggs, your bacon, your steak into the restaurant and saying, "Would you cook this for me?" I guarantee you, if you try it, take a steak or take a bag with a steak and a potato in, and ask the restaurant to cook that for you and see what happens. Okay. So what's going to happen in our industry, like in every other industry, is people are going to do what we allow them to do. Now, there's three reasons not to let someone bring their own parts in your shop. Actually, more than that. So one is you make me crazy. You're the person that complains the most. You bring me the cheapest parts that don't fit, and then when your car is here for 3 weeks because you had to go back to Amazon and try to get the right part, it sat here in my way, And now you're mad at me because your car's not fixed because you didn't supply the part. In most states, your warranty on parts, no matter what you write on the work order, you have the customer sign, is exactly the same as any warranty on any part that you would give to any customer that comes in your shop and you supply the parts. So whether you like it or not, if you're giving a 3-year, 36,000-mile warranty to your regular customers who let you supply the parts and make your margin, you're giving the same warranty to the person that brings their own parts to your shop. Because when you go to court and that judge says, why did you do this? Or why didn't you, they think you're the professional and you will lose that court case. Plain and simple, that's just how it is. Number one. Number two, if the insurance company that does your liability insurance finds out that you are letting people supply their own parts and creating that liability, not knowing the quality, the provenance of the part, they can and might cancel you or raise your rates. Okay? Because you're creating additional liability for them because you do not know where that part came from. You do not know what's in that part or how it's going to work or anything. Now, number three, I have to make a certain margin or I go out of business. I cannot let you bring your own steak into my restaurant and cook it for you because then I don't make the money I need and I still have to pay for the lights and the overhead and everything else and make a profit. So the answer would be no, I don't allow it. Think about this. What if every shop was like every restaurant and we just said no, I won't take those parts. Yes, I know you can buy them cheaper, but I don't know the quality. I don't know the provenance. I don't know if they're a counterfeit part. I don't know if they're a quality part. If the part doesn't fit, now the thing's your bay, your area is going to be tied up for weeks at a time while the customer goes and gets another part. Now, you think this is a new thing, parts pricing and parts. We've been fighting this same battle for 42 years. As long as I've been in the industry, people have been coming in my shop with, I can buy that alternator cheaper at Pep Boys, AutoZone. I can buy that alternator cheaper at Napa. You know what the answer to that is? Absolutely, yes, you can. But it does not come with a warranty. It does not come with a guarantee that it's fixing your problem. It does not come with my customer service. So think about that steak. I can buy it cheaper at the local grocery store. You bet you can, but it doesn't come cooked perfectly on your plate with a guarantee that it won't be tough and that you'll enjoy it. And it doesn't come with someone that cleans up the dishes. Okay. We have to stop playing the games that the cheap people in the world want us to play so that they can save a few nickels. We have to start being business people in our industry. If we want to be treated like professionals, we have to act like professionals. One more comment here. It's a big area. The guy that brings his own alternator, his own water pump, and you write on the ticket, hey, no warranty. 30 days later, when that thing goes bad, you want to know who he's going to blame? Not the company that made the part. He's going to blame you because you're the one that put it on the vehicle, and he's going to be the one that's in your face demanding that you put another one on, and not the guy that says, "Oh, I bought the part, so it's my fault because I didn't buy a good part." I know I've experienced it many, many times over the years. We have to stop letting people bring their own parts into our shops.
Mhm. Excellent. Well, thank you, Cecil. Again, fantastic information here. I hope everyone on the call here, this webinar, found it extremely helpful and useful. Closing here, up on your screen, you'll see a couple of QR codes to learn a bit more about the Institute and the services they provide. Also, you'll see a QR code there for signing up for a PartsTech demo. And I'd encourage anyone who's curious about how PartsTech is helping shops understand and monitor gross profit as they're looking for parts and building ROs. We'd be happy to show you how PartsTech is solving those problems for you. So again, thank you all for joining today. We will send this recording out to everyone here on the call and those that may have missed it as well. Cecil, again, thank you very much for coming on and imparting your wisdom. Everyone, have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.